I'm Eileen Gunn. What I'm going to read is 6 short pieces that Michael Swanwick and I were working on. These are my half of a series of horoscope stories that Michael Swanwick and I were working on in China. I was hoping he'd be here, but he's not here yet. We could have both read our different pieces. And then I have a very short piece that is the beginning of the novel that I'm working on. And it's kind of the setup for the novel. So if you're very good after the horoscopes, there will be some meaty stuff. And if you're familiar with Chinese horoscope, animals, they'll be familiar animals to you, and this is from the point of view of different animals. You can figure out the animals as I read. Looking good. Out for a cruise down the local happy lane, nodding to the neighbors, winking at the ladies, feeling pretty good about myself, I came upon a piece of precious metal, a flat golden square with a circle in the middle. How odd it was. It was the wrong shape for a coin, and yet it was obviously made of gold. I leaned down for a closer look. Closer, it seemed even more attractive than it had at first. I was fascinated. It had strange glyphs impressed on one surface, and straight rays like beams of the sun on the other. I poked my beak into it. Oh, it felt good. This might look very elegant displayed upon my body, I thought. The hole in the center seemed larger than before. It was a remarkable glittering decoration, but what could I do with it? Would it fly, I wondered? I caught it on my beak and threw back my neck. Could I make it spin? Just then, Monkey leaped from a tree, grabbed hold of the coin, and pulled it down over my head. It was a tight fit, and it stuck around my gullet. I ran to the pond to look at myself in the water. From deep beneath the surface, I looked back at myself. I looked elegant and rich, a rooster with a stunning gold collar. It brought out the highlights of ochre and reddish umber in my feathers. It was too tight, I knew that. If I wasn't able to get it off, I would never again swallow food. But I would make a lovely corpse. Down, boy. How could we not be loyal? If we bite you, you shoot us. My mother, the bitch, was not loyal or subservient, and you saw what happened to her. I know she didn't go to the countryside to live with some farmer, and I try not to spend a lot of time at the market in Yangshuo. Being loyal doesn't mean I don't notice when I'm slighted. You dress me in pajamas and photograph me in embarrassing positions and post videos of me on the internet. You don't even care that I might log in and my friends might log in. I still love you, but my feelings are hurt, and I think I'm getting a little paranoid, a little depressed. But I deal. I widen my eyes, I relax my brow. I take deep breaths, which makes you wonder why I'm panting so hard. I lie on the floor with my front paws crossed, which you think is so damned cute. I wait. One day, my eyes liquid with love for you, I will take back my dignity. Stretch time. Well, you can't just lie there perfectly still forever. Every so often, you must, at the very least, adjust your limbs. I know this causes problems, and that many people have gone to their deaths. But look at it this way. People are going to die, so why not die by dragon? Yeah, it looks weird and scary, roads bent and torn up, buildings all over the street, precious cultural properties becoming so many sun-dried bricks. And the people, all the people, old and young, all over the world. I'm sorry about the school children, but it wasn't me who skimped on the cement, the reinforcing rods, all that. You had the material and the know-how to protect those children, and you did not. When the world was young, we didn't know our own strength. We didn't know our own weakness. When we found out, still, we chose to stretch. Have you ever sat in a box for 1,000 years? No? Well, think about it. We get kinks all up and down our spines. And we never hear a polite word, a decent expression of condolence for all our deaths. The really big ones, they hurt us too, especially the old. We lose a few of our number every time. Even the babies, just points on the Richter scale, almost imperceptible to you. Those frequent little tremors are our children's lives being snuffed out like candles. Frankly, if it didn't kill us sometimes to stretch, we'd do it more often. There is way more of you than there are of us. You can spare a few people, can't you? Show some sympathy. Show some respect. The hog of the forsaken. I live in a pen, a box full of mud. It's dark here and wet, but I'm not complaining. Who would listen to me? I'm a pig. I'm supposed to like this kind of thing. I cheered the falling angels as they arched down from the sky. After they landed, I chewed them. They wept, and I did too. I do terrible things. But after that, I said, no more angels. If there's anything worse than the way most people die, it would be to die that way without even a witness. So there's where I'm needed. I watch, and I clean up the mess. I'll pretty much eat anything they throw me, no matter how awful it is, as long as it's not angels again. Just like the dream eater eats only the bad dreams, I eat only the bad realities. Most of the time what I get is junk, garbage, leftovers, other people's leavings. They say that swine are omnivores, but I would never eat in a dream. People shouldn't despise me so. I was here before them. I am the descendant of dinosaurs and dragons. I am the earth and of the earth and covered with earth. I will watch them, and I will not feed myself in the bitumen black pie of by and by. Reality I will eat, and water hyacinths on Sundays. I wonder what the dream eater eats on Sundays. War and sheeps. I am the mildest of sheep, but everyone has a limit, and I've reached mine. Why do you stare at me like that? I have, all of us have, we sheep, a reputation for mildness, but it does not necessarily mean tractability. I mean, have you ever spent any quality time with a ram in breeding season? Headbutt central. My people are even-tempered. We do not normally bite, even if things get problematic. If herded, we pull together. If challenged, we succumb. If threatened, we allow ourselves to be taken and made into lamb chops or sweaters. And I'm not sure which is worse. I've seen some ghastly sweaters. We don't get a lot of respect for our nonviolence or for any other skills we might demonstrate. Purdue University says we're really only good for meat and wool, though it hints that career positions are available in weed management. The same people who say our most important use is meat also say that lamb and mutton make up only 6% of all the meat eaten in the world. That does not seem very important to me. Who is responsible for this? I say it's the dog. Humans are lazy. Dogs are the ones who run all over, barking like crazy, making us wheel about in circles and impeding our intellectual development. I say the time has come for sheep to declare war against dogs. We will win not by violence, but by strategy, by taking advantage of their weakness, which is their need to control us. I have thought it all out. We cannot outbite them, but we can make them run in circles. And finally, wake-up call. They say I'm a late riser, but I don't see it that way. I think the sun takes its own sweet time warming the world up in the morning. The sun works harder in the summer, and I'm happy enough to get up about 9, bask for a few hours before starting my day. In the winter, I pretty much hibernate, and nobody's surprised if they don't see me around. But the fall and the spring, those are hard times. I'm sluggish most of the day. I don't know why they call it that. Slugs are out and about busy as bees in the fall and spring, eating their little orange fringed way around the yard. They pretty much demolish any green stuff I put on the ground. That's why I stopped gardening, to tell the truth. Why should I work my butt off for slugs? Where was I? Oh yeah, the morning people, or the night people for that matter. I'm having trouble focusing on the subject here. It must be spring. The people that as soon as they get up, their brains work, them. At 9 a.m. they tell me I'm intelligent enough, those people. Then I ramp up, say about noon, and they're nowhere to be found. If I happen on one of them, I ask them, am I smarter than you now? And they say, oh yes, yes, you're very smart. You're smarter than I am. I say, that's not so smart. And then I eat them. Quite et demonstrandum. And Michael's stories are very, very different. We did not compare notes.
And what form will that be taking? What form will the collection
Actually, Marianne is publishing them as a chapbook, which will be available as soon as I produce a text that Michael agrees to. So, which could take a while. I mean, we're stubborn, both of us. I don't know why all of the horoscope animals are so grumpy, but they're definitely grumpy animals. And now I would like to read a little bit from the novel that I'm working on. And I think it pretty much explains itself. The title is The Education of Samantha Clemens. From an interview with Mark Twain in the New York Times, 1878, 2 years after the publication of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. It started when I was a child, of course, where begins the sequence of choices and consequences that determines the course of one's life. I was a tomboy, wild and incorrigible, and it was a natural enough thing for my friends to call me Sam. My mother, of course, preferred Samantha, and used that when she was angry at me. I could tell her temper by how my name changed from moment to moment, from Sammy to Sam to Samantha Langhorne Clemens. So being called Sam is for me like being perpetually in a state of maternal grace, which I tell you sincerely was hardly ever the case when I was a child. I had always preferred trousers to skirts, and that was fine enough when I was a small child. But as I got older, it started to draw comments from the more respectable-minded ladies of Hannibal. The first few years of school, Mr. Dawson made no fuss about my wardrobe. But by the time I was 10 or 11, there was a good bit of pressure on me to put away my childish habits, habitude included. I wore a skirt over my trousers in the wintertime, and in summer with school out, I could dress the way I wanted. I had crushes on other girls, of course, but that was not looked on amiss in those days. We'd walk arm in arm, Mary Lacey and I, and it caused not a flicker of ill regard in anyone's eyes. Of course, she was a bit of a scamp herself, as I've said elsewhere, but she betrayed me and married a young man, of all things, and became quite a thoroughly respectable matron, to everyone's surprise. Of course, I discovered the much vaunted charms of the opposite sex myself just a few years later, and had no idea how I could have overlooked them for so long. But I did feel sharply, right at that time, the loss of Mary. Before Mary, of course, was Huckleberry, for whom I actually pretended to be a young lady, but that's a very long story. I must write that up sometime. I heard from Hucky just after Tom Sawyer was published. She wrote me a letter, a very short letter on thin paper, in a pale blue envelope. It said, well, let me find it. I keep it in a drawer in my bedside table, just for old time's sake. There it is, addressed in a lovely archaic hand to Mrs. Samantha Clemens, Mark Twain, author of Tom Sawyer, Connecticut, US of A. I don't know how she knew we were living in Connecticut, but there you go. Hucky was always a sharp one for figuring things out. Here, I'll read it to you. Dear Mrs. Samantha Clemens, it begins. It has been a long time since we last saw one another, but I thought you might want to know what happened to me. I bought your recent book, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, and it did bring back the memories. I count those days well gone, but reading how you wrote it like it was all sunny summer days and whitewashing fences and play acting in caves, I marvel at how you can tell a tale with so much decoration. She signs it with her married name, and then there's a P.S. I see you made me a white boy. Well, of course I wrote her back and invited her to come down and visit us, but she has yet to come down. She says she likes things better in Canada, and I can't say I blame her with the way things are starting to go here. This is from an interview with Harriet Hucky Butler, 1885, after the publication of The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn in the Toronto Sunday Globe. Mr. Mark Twain, he called the boy in his book Huckleberry Finn, but that was not my name. There was a white man back then, and his name was Finn, and he said he was my daddy. He did not own me, though. I do not know for what reason he claimed that, and my name was not anything Finn. I was Oldfields Hucky, or Blankenship's Hucky, people who did not know much about me except I worked for the Blankenships. The way things was in slavery time, I was a child who had to keep a job all the day, from the time I was 3 years until the time I lighted out. It was not like a child job is here in a factory, where you get to stop after 12 hours. But at least we weren't kept up, cooped up in pens. It is still a hard time being a child, unless your folks is rich. Whatever my job was, I had to figure out how to do it myself most times. The white ladies didn't think they ought to have to teach me, and if I did it wrong, I got the switch until I did it right. I was owned by the Oldfield family, but they rented me out for a few dollars a year, plus the cost of what it took to keep me. They was basically raising me for market like a pig. Was kept out back and fed the leavings. I got food and an outfit of clothing twice a year, winter and summer. I was supposed to get a pair of shoes in the winter too, but mostly I went barefoot because I grew out of shoes too fast for the white folks wanting to buy them. Mr. Oldfield kept me moving from one place to another for work. Whoever needed me got me. There wasn't much work I could do when I was small. I watched babies a couple years younger than myself, kept flies away from them, that sort of thing. But as I got bigger, there was lots of things to do. Sweeping yards and whitewashing fences and carrying water from the pump and cleaning the outhouse. Lots of things. Did you read that other book, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by Mr. Mark Twain? You remember that part about whitewashing the fence? That was a funny scene. The part of it I liked best was that colored child who took one look at Tom and his fence and skedaddled. That child was a slave, and he had errands to run and a job to do, and he didn't have time for some white child's nonsense. You can see that right there in the book. That was one part of the book that was true. I worked outside people's houses mostly, in the yard or the stable, and I slept in the stable, unlike the boy in Mr. Twain's book, who slept in a nice private hogshead all the time. I didn't have the skills to work inside. I wanted to learn the inside work, but the white women said I didn't have the manner for it, by which I think they meant I was too dark. There was mean white folks, and of course I got whipped. But I was lucky. Every time I walked past the people chained together there in the town square, waiting to be sold south, I knew I was lucky, that far at least. There was a lot of black folk around there, not like here, and them folks sure was kind to me. They knew my mama was dead, and I had no one but them to raise me up. I remember Mr. Henry Johnson, a free black man who ran a blacksmith. Most kind man, most kind. I would go by on some errand for Mrs. Blankenship. He would call me over and give me some errand to run while I was out and about. And then he'd give me a piece of bread. Then he'd give me something, usually something to eat, like a piece of pork fat and a piece of bread. So good. One day he gave me a penny. I didn't know what to do with it, and I told him so. And he said, you hide it where nobody can find it, and you keep it until somebody gives you another penny, and then you'll have 2 pennies. There weren't no place I did that, and the next week he'd give me another penny. There weren't no place where I could spend pennies, because people would think I sold them. But he gave me a penny every once in a while, and pretty soon I had dozens of them stashed away. Mrs. Blankenship, she sent me off on her errands around town. Carry this here, get that there, you know. So I got out most days, not like them factory children. Just like the boy in the story, though, I'd ask him poke along, for she would notice if I take too long, and she would get the switch. After a while, it dawns on me that if I does the jobs too fast, I'm setting the bar real high, and I was going to have to jump over it again and again. So any new job she set me from then, I take my own sweet time. I do the old ones as fast as I always did. I declare you've gotten so stupid, Hucky, she says. How can it take so much longer to get to the general store and back when you can get over to Mrs. Clemens in no time at all? It's the hill, ma'am, I says. I have to go around the hog pen, too. She was not a woman who walked much about town, having the 6 children to care for and her husband to no account, and she was not neither a suspicious woman. No one was bothered to see a colored child walking near the school with an ear out. I was catching grasshoppers for fishing. I couldn't see the blackboard, but I could hear the lessons and the recites. I could hear the spellings, too, but that didn't do me no good. Letters was hard, but I learned some history about kings and princes and Andrew Jackson. One time, I was out running an errand for Miss Blankenship, and I see Samantha Clemens playing with the older boys, Mumbledy-Peg or some other kind of game with knives. She was 7 or 8, and she was losing, but she just kept at it. Finally, she bets her knife. I think that child is going to lose her knife, and then how will she get it back? Then boys will keep it just to teach her a lesson about playing with them. And then she does lose it. The look on her face says everything. And then she toughens. I goes over to them and I says, I want to play too. And they laugh at me and they say, what you got to put out? And I think about that. I don't really have nothing. I'll show you my belly button, I say. Well, that gets them interested. But that's because none of them has ever seen me play Mumbley Peg. Maybe they was thinking the colored girls don't play Mumbley Peg. Well, we do, but not when the white folks is watching. That would be the end of our knives then. That's the end. And we have just a couple minutes. Anybody have any questions?
So what's the status of that story?
That is the beginning of the novel. I've got about 35,000 words on it. I'm still juggling with the voices, but I think that Hucky's voice is I like Hucky's attitude, and I was trying to write the same voice in a child's voice, and that was kind of a dead end. So I think I'm starting off, and a lot of Hucky's stuff will be her telling me about her childhood and her escape. Thank you.
So is it primarily Hucky's story or Samantha's story?
It's both their stories. Samantha, what I want is to have all of, this was actually Michael Swanwick's idea, not my own, so I can talk about it, and it seems like a perfectly good idea. If it were my idea, I'd be apologizing all over the place. But it's Michael Swanwick's, and the way I've been restructuring his idea is everything that Mark Twain wrote stays the same. How would a woman have the life experience to write that? And then Twain's experience, I've been reading, I've read hundreds of books on the emotional lives of enslaved children and the games they played and stuff like that, and on Mark Twain's arc, his story arc, so to speak, his biography, in which he evolved from being a racist white kid who played. These kids all played together when they played. Black kids didn't get much of a chance to play. They were usually working. They usually worked just all the time. But when the kids did play together, like when she was a chance to play Mumbley Peg, the black kids played that together. She knew how to play Mumbley Peg, and she was damn good. But the white kids had never seen that because, the kids wouldn't have been allowed to have knives if the white folks had seen them with knives. They'd just take them away. So I want to write about the childhood and then the different arcs of their lives. And my assumption with Samantha is that she cross-dressed. Carolyn Schuler gave me 6 books on women cross-dressing in the Southwest in the 19th century. So I am well equipped to write the same life story that Clemens had with the female cross-dressing. And I had thought, well, what about when he's in San Francisco? He hung out in a steam bath, and they take a steam bath and they sit around in the bar and drink and smoke cheap cigars. How's he going to do that? And about 2 years ago, a book came out that was a history of firemen in San Francisco, and it included a large chunk of a fireman whose name was Thomas Sawyer, and who claimed that he knew Mark Twain during those years. And this was published, and his story was published in the New York Times, and it was never refuted by Twain. Twain never addressed it. There's a lot of stuff Twain just never, that he glided over. So he never denied it or affirmed it. But there's a long description that was from the New York Times in 1902, where this guy named Tom Sawyer is talking about his friendship with Twain and how they hung out together in this steam bath in San Francisco. And I've been thinking, how's he going to do this? How is she going to do this? Well, she says she's got a cold, okay? And she wraps a mustard plaster around her. I thought, but he was there for 3 months. This isn't going to last for 3 months. So in the New York Times in 1902, this guy is quoted as saying, yeah, well, the entire time Sam was with us in San Francisco, he had this awful cold, and he always had this mustard plaster wrapped around his chest. And I'm like, oh, okay, so I am basically changing history while I'm writing the novel. I'm going to be really careful. I'm getting a stop sign. Well, thank you all for coming.